Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Please join me in welcoming our television and webcast viewers. My name is Fred Mifflin, President of the Canadian Club of Toronto. Viewers, we're very pleased that you're participating with us today. For 120 years, the Canadian Club has been proud to provide a forum for leaders in every aspect of society to share their ideas with us and to challenge our thinking. We're committed to providing a welcoming venue for discussion and debate on issues that impact our daily lives. Through our programs and activities, we offer access to dynamic public, business, and public leaders from around the world. Our guest speaker today is a great example. Before I formally introduce Zita Cobb, here's a snapshot of some of our upcoming events. On Wednesday, November 2nd, join us for breakfast at Facebook headquarters as John Ehrlichman, anchor of BNN and CTV National News, sits down with Jordan Banks, Managing Director of Facebook and Instagram Canada, to talk about how social media and disruptors are changing the way successful businesses go to market. And on Monday, November 7th, in partnership with the University of Waterloo's Faculty of the Environment, moderator and co-producer of Dream Girl, the documentary, Komal Minas takes the stage with panelists Debbie Fong of Yoga Tree and Susan MacArthur of Green Soil Investments to discuss the power of female entrepreneurs and what it takes to inspire the next generation of leaders. To order tickets or to learn more about the club, please visit our website at canadianclub.org. You can also join the conversation via Twitter and Instagram by following us at CDNCLUBTO. I want to thank the youth and young leaders with us today who are sponsored by the Murray Frum Foundation, Isabel Bassett, Michael McMillan and Kathy Spool, and NR Store. Thank you for your support, and thanks for joining us today. And now, our guest speaker. The Canadian Social Entrepreneurship Foundation defines a social entrepreneur as an individual who brings innovative solutions to society's most pressing social problems. A social entrepreneur is ambitious and persistent, and is committed to addressing major social issues and offering innovative solutions. So our guest today, Zita Cobb, is the quintessential social entrepreneur. Now, at this point, I have to declare my bias introducing Zita as a fellow Newfoundlander and Labradorian, something that I'm very proud of. Zita grew up on Fogo Island on the north coast of Newfoundland. She went on to a very successful career as a senior finance and strategy professional in the high-tech industry before pursuing her personal goals to dedicate her energies to philanthropic work in the communities she calls home. The recent Order of Canada recipient is not only being lauded for her commitment to her native community in Newfoundland and Labrador, her ideas and approaches are also being studied as role models for future social entrepreneurship, or as she calls it, community economics. Zita saw potential, not problems, in the collapse of the East Coast cod industry. Instead of abandoning ship, she set out to reinvent and reinvest in her community. She's parlayed her education, her business background, and international travel experience into developing long-term viable solutions to revitalize Fogo Island. The results have been transformative. Shorefast Foundation's most significant projects to date are the Fogo Island Inn, Fogo Island Arts, the Fogo Island Shop, Fogo Island Cod, and Fogo Island Snow Crab, which is served at some of Toronto's finest restaurants. We're pleased to have Annette Verscheren moderating today's discussion. Annette, a fellow East Coaster, is an officer of the Order of Canada for her leadership in the retail industry and for her long-standing commitment to corporate social responsibility. For a period of 15 years, Annette was instrumental in growing Home Depot Canada, both at home and internationally. She currently serves as the chair and CEO of NR Store. If you have any specific questions that you would like Annette to address to Zita, please complete one of the Q&A cards which are on your tables, and one of our volunteers will collect them. So at this point, I'm very proud to welcome Zita and Annette to our stage. The Canadian Club of Toronto stage is yours.
Okay, okay, all of us. Okay. In the middle. Okay. Okay. In the middle. Oh, he's in the middle. Thank you. Thank you. Great. Super. Oh, what fun we're going to have, Zita.
We definitely have a tilt to the east here
We
today.
have a tilt to the east. So I was born and raised in North Sydney, which some say is the capital of Newfoundland, because when people went to the mainland, they stopped in North Sydney, and I think half of the community are Newfoundlanders. But what fun it is to be here today with Zita and talk about her story, her wonderful, wonderful journey. You've heard Fred introducing that relationship, but we're both islanders, Zita and I, and come from a very interesting and similar background. And but what we want to do today is talk, I think, a lot about inclusive capitalism. Talk about, you know, this wonderful community economic success story that we have here in Canada, and talk about how Zita got here. So Zita, if I can ask you the first question. You sometimes say that you have lived in 3 centuries. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Just to be clear, I'm 58, not 358. But it's true. I grew up off the northeast coast of Newfoundland on a little island that's far away from far away. And I feel like I'm very far away from you people over there. Until I was 10, Fogo Island had very little contact with the mainland. And we had no running water, we had no electricity, my parents couldn't read and write, and every once in a while the ferry would run, but not so often. We were inshore fishing people, salt fish people, to be more to the point about it. And it was a perfectly intact community. And we had no money. There was no, well, I don't know, the Bank of Nova Scotia came to Fogo Island, first of all, by boat. But I think they didn't make many trips because there really wasn't much money. And business was done through what's called a truck system. Yeah. Anyway, this to me felt like a perfect life until I was between 8 and 10. The worst of the 20th century arrived in the form of the industrialization of the fishery. When, you know, in Newfoundland, when we say fish, we mean cod. If I want to say mackerel, I'll say mackerel. So within 30 years of the first factory dragger being built, the cod, which was one of the biggest populations of fish on the planet, was brought to the brink of ecological extinction. So you can imagine, overnight, everything we knew, everything my dad knew, was useless. And we really fell out of our own story. And I remember the hushed conversations in the night of my parents going, what's going to happen to us? Because at the time there was a big resettlement in Newfoundland. So by now I've lived through 2 centuries, which was the 19th century, the 20th century, and my career, I studied business. Annette and I have in some ways lived the same life. She started from farming and I started from fishing to come here. In any event, my career was in fiber optics, and specifically in wave division multiplexing, which was a really important part of enabling the digital revolution. And so those are the 3 centuries, and I think I'm really driven by this idea that we're not actually on the best path. And sometimes if you're not on the best path, you kind of need to take a few steps back. So
given those 3 centuries, how has business changed over your years, and your perspective changed in terms of how you look at business?
The first time I realized that business sort of existed was during the collapse of the inshore fishery, because we could see these monster draggers right there. If you went up on Tom Hart's Hill, which was behind our house, At a time that we ostensibly had a 12-mile fishing limit, you could see them. And my father used to say, like, what are they thinking? Like, what kind of a system would cause people to keep fishing until the fish are all gone? It just doesn't make any sense. So that was my first introduction to business. So I studied business for the specific purpose of trying to understand what happened. And really, in my first year of university, two incredible things happened. I read Small is Beautiful, which I know most of you, I'm looking at ages, maybe the young people here don't know it, but it was a seminal book. At the time I thought, this is the most important book I've ever read. I still think it's the most important book I've ever read. And I had this realization one day. Growing up in Fogo Island, I'd never seen a cauliflower, but I saw a cauliflower in Ottawa. And I had this realization that, wow, this is it. Fogo Island is a little floret.
Yep.
And Ottawa is a bigger floret, and I've since discovered there are even bigger florets again. And all these florets are all held together by the connective tissue, which is the stem. And the stem has a job. Its job is to bring nutrition to the florets. And it really struck me in my first year of university, what happened in 1968 when I was 10, is the stem became so self-serving, it forgot its job was to bring nutrition. And so I think about business as having a job.
Yeah.
And the job is to bring nutrition to the florets, and those florets are communities. And you know, we're all kind of tangled up together in this beautiful cauliflower, of which there's just one, I think.
So you've made a lot of money. You've taken that money and you've developed something extraordinary. Tell me about your personal relationship with money, Zita.
Money's a funny thing, and I don't think that we human beings really understand our relationship with money. I mean, we don't hoard turnips. I can tell you that for a fact. We share turnips. But there's something about money that, well, it certainly makes me uncomfortable. I don't trust it. I mean, it's an intensely useful commodity, but we need to be, I'm always very careful with it, with thinking about how close to let it come to me. I'm a fan of this young writer named Charles Eisenstein who has come up with this concept called sacred economics. So he talks about sacred capital. Sacred capital, things like human capital and social capital and cultural capital. You could even add spiritual capital. And then there's money, which is what we usually call capital. And this finding this right relationship between money, which is hugely important, but not sacred, and sacred capital. And so I guess I always think in those kinds of intersections, and how can the intersections be productive ones for the sacred?
Yeah. So tell us what's so special about Fogo Island. Why is it important? Why is it so successful? Tell us why this place that is in the easternmost spot, I guess, in our country. It is a magnificent, beautiful spot, but it's out in the middle of nowhere, really hard to get to, really hard place to build. Tell us what's so great about Fogo Island?
I think what's so special about Fogo Island is not that it's special, but that it's specific. And I think human joy comes from specificity. And Fogo Island still is an intact community. It's one of Canada's oldest communities.
Yeah.
And people, I'm back to Schumacher for a minute. Nature and culture are the two great garments of human life. Business and technology are the two great tools that can and should serve them. And so Fogo Island, as a small island, which Alan Doyle calls a salty Narnia, it's a really good proxy for a small planet. And the most important thing in any human life are relationships. And so, I'm an 8th generation Fogo Islander, so obviously I have a lot of relationships on Fogo Island, and they go back centuries. And it is a place that you can experience, and I think as visitors, and you've been, Annette, so I know you know.
A couple of times, yeah.
As a visitor, you can experience what it's like to be in an embodied relationship with a place, with a geography, with the people that are dead and gone. And so having this relationship with time, I think it kind of helps us get over ourselves. And I think small places are really great experiments. I actually think, life on the coast of Newfoundland has been a grand experiment for 400 years. It's a wonder we're still there. But there's a lot to learn for the big florets from those little ones.
Do you think that you could develop the Fogo Island concept throughout rural Canada?
I think we could do this in Toronto too.
Yes, we can.
Yes. And I think that the turn we're all trying to figure out how to make without it being catastrophic or with as little catastrophe as possible, because we're already facing catastrophe as human beings. I think we've created a pretty reasonable mess for ourselves as it is. I think the trick is how to use business to its potential, because I think we haven't even begun. I mean, if you think about making money, well, you know, there's lots of money in the world.
Yeah.
It's not always where we need it to be, but we're actually pretty good at making money. And if we could take the organizing power of business and actually turn it into the service of place and community and society, wow, we could solve all kinds of problems. And we could do it while wearing our business suits. One of the great ironies I always think from my working life is it always felt like we put on our suits during the day and we do certain things, and then at night we have to go home and change into a ball gown to raise money for something that we probably could have stayed home in our pajamas if we'd been different during the day. And so I think it's about, you know, but business is such a delicious tool. And to me it's super exciting to think about community economics and how we can put it into service in a different way.
It reminds me, Zita, of Mark Carney's speech in May of 2004, and he said, you know, encouraging enterprise and rewarding industrial initiative is essential for economic progress, but social capital must be maintained for that progress to be sustained. And I think this is a big question that we need to be asking ourselves as business leaders, as leaders in this community. Are we balancing the challenges that we see in terms of globalization and in terms of community? I come from a very small community too. We relied on the coal mines and the steel plants. And the islanders are very industrious, they're very innovative. And I felt that some of that was taken away during the last century or so in Cape Breton. And I too believe that there's a renaissance happening there. There are a bunch of innovators and young people starting businesses and really seeing that they don't have to come to the big city. They don't have to come to another place. I think place is extraordinarily important. I love Ontario. I live here. I've lived here since I was 30 years old. But I belong to Cape Breton. I belong to the Maritimes. You can't get that out of me. And that's a place that I go back to because my family lives there, my community. Your family lives in Fogo Island. It's really, really important to find ways in which we can allow our people to live in the places they want. Surely we have seen the lack of success in terms of how we've dealt with the Indigenous communities in our country, trying to get them to other locations. It doesn't work. We have to spend our energy into finding places, finding ways in which we can develop them in their communities. So let me tell you I want to ask you about business thinkers and what you've learned along the way. What has influenced you particularly? You talked a little bit about Schumacher, I think, but tell us a little bit about that.
Well, in my career, I worked for a company from the very end of my career for about a dozen years called JDS Uniphase. And the CEO of the company for most of my career was a man named Joseph Strauss, who was a physicist, great Canadian, great business guy. He used to come in every morning and say, the most important thing is to keep the most important thing the most important thing. And he will go on to say, and if you don't know what the most important thing is, maybe you should go home until you figure it out, because you're probably going to do more harm than you're going to do good. And so in the technology business, the most important thing was the technology. Don't miss the next wave of technology. And so I think when we are, whether it's Cape Breton or Newfoundland or Northern Canada or even Toronto, we sometimes lose track as human beings of the most important things. And so if you ask any person that I've ever met, love, beauty, respect, all those things we say, these are the things that are most important to us. But they're not easy to measure, those things. And so they end up being put last. We're going to do that on the weekend. And I don't think, have done the best job of organizing our lives or our business lives to optimize, to use a business term, for those things.
Yeah.
And so I think working with Joseph, learning, don't lose your focus on the most important things, and try to put everything else in service of that.
Yeah.
And I think, to your point about small communities, life is a rhythm of opposites. And one of the great questions that I live with all the time is, my dad used to say, nature knows everything. And we humans are so arrogant, we don't pay enough attention. Nature knows the cure for cancer. We haven't figured it out yet.
Yeah.
And so, what is it about us as human beings when we make human systems? They don't seem to naturally have the checks and balances or the golden mean of natural systems.
Yeah.
So we need to think deeply about that. And I think as we get to be better business people, it's like we need a kind of a really higher level of conscious awareness of what are we doing, and who is it for, and what's it for.
So on the weekend when we were talking, we talked about investment versus development, right? And what does development mean in terms of capitalism? I'd like to explore that a little bit with you.
My dad could never figure out, I mean, he's been dead and gone for a long time, and so he had no relationship with money, he never understood it, but he did have a bank account which actually got like $100 in it. He had to go put his X to make a withdrawal. But he couldn't ever understand, and no matter how hard I tried to explain it, he never got it, that someone could make their living by not working, but by making, like, investing money.
Yeah.
So he never got the whole interest kind of idea.
Yeah.
And so I forgot the question that you asked me exactly.
The difference between development and investment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you think about all the potential that lives in a human life, and every human life, there's potential. I was reading the other day, Warren Buffett can't figure out how to make any more return. It's a struggle to get return.
Because his base is so big.
Yeah, and money, that's one quality of money, is it's always looking for a return. But if you took some of that money and invested it in the sacred, I don't know, maybe he could think about going to Detroit, which has a place of great potential, with lots of people that have potential and dreams that could be productive members and citizens of society. It might not get a financial return, it would get a social return.
Yeah.
Well, it would get a financial return, I think, over what time horizon?
Yeah.
That's the lovely thing about community businesses and this rhythm of opposites we're talking about. If someone's starting a little business on Fogo Island, it is not our intention to start a chain of hotels and inns and conquer the world. Making a relationship with the idea of enough.
Yeah.
And so if we can do enough to sustain our population and grow it, because we used to be 6,000, it's our great ambition to get back to 6,000 people, that's enough, that's pretty good. Then what we have to figure out how to do is hang on to it through the generations. Yeah. And so that kind of thinking would be development.
Yep.
And is development.
Exactly.
Whereas if you've got $10 and you've set out to grow it into 20 as quickly as possible, that might be investment, but it's not development. It can be development, it's not necessarily development.
But you had a good year in Fogo Island?
We did.
Yes.
This is our 4th year, we're still measuring, and none of us really knew what we were doing, and we're better now, we kind of know what we're doing. We will make money this year.
Isn't that
and
great?
The inn is the structure of the inn. I'm super excited about the fact that Canada now has a registry of social enterprises. We have a definition of social enterprise as a nation, and that is super exciting. So we will make money this year as social business. The inn's a social business, the fish business is a social business, and that goes up to we operate it in a business trust. That goes back to the charity and stays in the community. And so Fogo Island is an exceptionally lucky place, partly because of art, because the National Film Board came to Fogo Island in that really slippery time in the late 60s and started a project which was really an art project. It's now called the Fogo Process. It was a participatory film project at a time that Joey, the then Premier, was about to resettle us all. The NFB and Memorial University stood in the wind with us and said, now just a second, before we all go rushing off to wherever we're rushing off to, let's understand what's happening here. And out of that process, which is asked questions in a different way, brought people together in a very powerful way, a cooperative formed, which owns the fish business on Fogo Island to this day. All the fish plants are owned by a cooperative. And now we've put this other leg on the economy in the hospitality world, which is owned by the community. So I think not every business model is appropriate for every size of place, but for small places, I think local ownership of the capital, financial
So you're
capital,
recycling the capital in your
Exactly.
community.
Exactly.
As opposed to it going off to other places.
Yeah, I read when I was starting into this, trying to understand this whole travel world, when we were on Fogo Island trying to figure, can we do this? Like, do we have what it takes? And we kind of settled on a definition of hospitality, which I have to say I did not experience in Toronto last night. I'm serious. It's like, who would sell somebody a hotel room that is over a construction site and not tell them? That's not hospitality. And it's like, and I was saying to the lovely people here from Humber Hospitality Program, in the hospitality industry, we should be the leaders in business ethics, because we're supposed to be taking care of people when they're sleeping. There's a lot of trust involved here.
Yes.
So
That's great.
Anyway, so when we were getting started and thinking about hospitality, we settled on the definition that hospitality is the love of a stranger. And it is such a sacred trust. Imagine, like, somebody lies down and trusts that you are making sure that nothing's going to happen to them, and are trusting you with their time to come this great distance. See, I forgot the question you asked me again, Annette.
No,
I got so preoccupied with last night.
We're talking about recycling.
Recycling money, exactly. And so, yes, I read this horrifying statistic, which was of $100 spent by a traveler from the so-called developed world to the less developed world, $5 stayed in the local community. It's like, wow, that's kind of crazy. So then you have to ask the question, well, who are those businesses for? What's the point? And so, of course, we set out to say, whatever dollar comes to Fogo Island, let's do our very best to hold on.
So how much of the money stays in Fogo Island?
For the inn, it's 80%, 90%. And then some gets out to Newfoundland. That's not a bad thing either.
So you run fishery business, you run a furniture business, you run, what else do you run there?
We have 3 social businesses and Fogo Island Arts. And we started with art.
That's right. Why art? Tell us a little bit about why art is just so important to your whole vision.
Art is a way of knowing that is essential to being able to engage with all of our humanity, all of our ways of knowing. I think in the business world, we are trained as business people to be narrow. You know, to be too narrow sometimes. And you know, this the greatest Schumacher sentence is, every human being should get up in the morning, look at the world, and try to see it as whole. I didn't learn that in business school, but we should be learning that in business school, because we would be different. We have this idea that we want to get out in the world, and we do it for our own businesses. It's called economic nutrition labeling. So, you know, we talk about externalities and all of the consequences of some of our business activities. I think this is a way to get at this directly. So if you buy something from the Fogo Island shop, we make furniture. We sort of accidentally got into the furniture business. It comes with a label that tells you where the money went. If you spent $1,000 for something, it mimics the food labeling. Remember when, I remember when we didn't have food labeling, but now you can, look at that box of breakfast cereal and think, oh, maybe I shouldn't have the second one. Perhaps I shouldn't have had the first one, because the information is there. So do the same thing. For every purchase, you can see where the money goes, how much went to labor, how much went to expenses, how much went to overhead, whatever, how much went to profit. Profit's not a bad thing. Financial capital deserves and needs a return as well. It's a question of how much. And then we show at the bottom the geography. Where did the money go?
Neat. So you were, until you did this, you were in the digital business. Digital business, the premise is that it's going to cause a lot of unemployment. There, the jobs of the past are changing. And tell me, is there an alternative? And, your example of what you're doing on Fogo Island, do you see that as part of the alternative?
This is the biggest sort of quandary, I think, of our times. We seem to have more people on the planet than we need because to work. And so, as my dad would say, what are we going to do with them all? Throw them all overboard? I mean, what are we going to do with us all?
Yeah.
And I think the promise of the digital age was it would enable more peer-to-peer commerce. I could be making something over here and selling it to you over there, and it would enable more exchange. But I think what's happened is it's really become controlled by these so-called platform monopolies, which have actually caused, I think they've caused a disorder of the connective tissue, of the stem. And so I think that it's, again, we need to step back from how we're using the digital world. And I mean, it's a tool that we invented it, but we actually don't know how to properly use it yet. But I don't think the natural consequence of the digital age is unemployment.
No.
I think if we get a grip of the tool and really use it for peer-to-peer exchange, it won't have that consequence.
And are you talking about the introduction of way more sustainability in how we're running our enterprises, how our governments are run? Do you see a movement in that direction, or do you see us not quite getting there yet?
I think the spirit of the change that has to happen has already arrived. I think we all feel it in our bones and know it in our hearts. Stanislav Lech had this great sentence that every snowflake in an avalanche pleads not guilty. We're caught up in this growth trap that's not so easy to get out of, and we're all perpetrators of that, and we're all victims of that as well.
Is that because it's easier to calculate? It's easier to understand and see what a number tells you versus the value or benefit or cost you put on society? I mean, is that one of the big problems we have?
For sure. I think we trust our brains too much. I mean, because the brain is only a small part of our ways of knowing. And our brains overfocus on things we can measure. And we can measure how much I have compared to how much you have. And we take for granted that the social fabric is going to be there for us. But then, I think as those of us that have more, it's very easy for us to become, because I think this is another thing about the human relationship with money, I think it actually causes anxiety. And it causes a kind of detachment. And so, we need to be very careful that we don't create a world that's filled up with, people who are financially advantaged, that are global operators. I mean, this is the other thing that's so interesting, that our relationship, we are embodied creatures. And so the most local place we live is in our own body. We need an attachment to place, and I don't mean even national, I mean just geography, a rock in my case, or a farm in your case. And every Canadian, if you scratch the skin, I think you'll find some place that makes their heart beat a little faster. Because I think that's a part of what defines us, as being attached to geography. And we are now trying to navigate when you think about it, in the old-fashioned way of thinking about business, what are the inputs to use instruments? I mean, I think what we have to try and find is a kind of existential economics as opposed to instrumental economics. And I think we can do it. It takes art to help us. But when you think about labor, capital, land, well, one of those three is infinitely mobile and unbounded. So we need to be really thoughtful about the relationship among the three.
Back to Mark Carney's comments, right, in that speech. I think that's so critical. I think proud opening the New York Times, if anybody read the New York Times on Sunday, and the front page is a story about a Syrian family that came to Canada. And you read the Wall Street Journal a few days ago, September 17th, talking about maybe some countries can get their immigration strategies right. We have a country that has such a great foundation, is such a great community of people. What you're trying to do is dig deeper and make it happen through social enterprise. I don't even know if it's social enterprise.
It's just business.
It's business.
Business should be, I mean, someone asked me the other day, do you think that business is reconcilable with wholeness?
Yeah.
So absolutely, I do.
So do I. I mean, I ran Home Depot, and I just saw all the things that we could do as a company to really make a difference, to sustain, and give back to the landfill sites, I mean, we just look through this as a filter. How do you keep your employees happy? I think these are all things that enterprise has such an opportunity to do. I really do.
Somebody has to give up something.
But someone's got to give up something. We've got to give up. I've got to give up something. I mean, I am really lucky person. I did way better than I ever thought that I could do, and you too. And I think part of that is recognizing that you've got to give back, but in a holistic way. And I think that's...
I mean, that's the other interesting thing we haven't talked about in much detail is the whole idea of charity. Charity is important. It's been with us since the dawn of time.
Yeah.
And it's always that somebody doesn't have enough to eat. But in and of itself, it's not sustainable.
No.
It's not... I've never met a person that wants to be the recipient of charity, at least not for a very long period of time.
No.
And so how can we use all the money that's caught up in various charitable places and get it actually working in business-like ways that helps develop communities?
Exactly. A couple questions from the floor. Governments are very focused on big business. What should governments be doing to champion small and community business?
I think just getting this registry for social business, I'll tell you, is a huge thing, because it's what a legal set of contortions you had to go through to operate a social business, because none of our systems are set up for it. I mean, always the things around making things, like there was a woman on Fogo Island who wanted to start a bakery, and she wanted to get registered, and was like, oh my God, the paperwork and the this and the that. There's got to be a way to just make that simpler and reporting simpler, and helping people see that every person can be a business person. It's not just for people that have suits like you and me.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I think that
so governments could create that environment, reduce the bureaucracy, adjust their systematic bureaucratic approaches.
Create a place that is easier to play in, that isn't so closely monitored and regulated. And what's the worst that could happen? I mean, one person might do something they shouldn't do, but all the rest of the people are going to do really good things. It'll offset it.
It'll offset it. Absolutely will. You keep harping on place and the importance of place. Tell me, this thing is so important to you. Why is that? If you were born in Cape Dorset, would you feel the same way?
I think that our human relationship with place, all of the places that in our lives we come into contact with in intimate ways, are really important, because it's our primary relationship. Because we are embodied, I think our confidence comes from that. Whether you love the place, not everybody is born where they feel they belong or want to belong. Nonetheless, that's a relationship. Who we are, we are all part of a continuity. I mean, most of our human lives, what are we here? Maybe 90 years, 80 years, maybe 100, I don't know, it's changing. But that's such a short time.
It is.
And if you don't have the continuity with the people that came before you can call this culture, then you're going to get kind of self-obsessed and not realize that your job is to take something that's been given to you and pass it on better to someone that's come. It's a relay. It's not about you. And I think when you take us away from that deep connection with place, and there are a lot of us in the world like this now, where we can be anywhere we want, any day of the week, and we've got people have homes, 20 homes. It's kind of crazy. I think that the relationship gets broken to place, and then we lose our sense of who we are. We think we become too arrogant, I think, and we lose our sense of the beauty and the loveliness of responsibility to a place.
So we need to build our economy in Canada and around the world, probably in different ways. And, it frightens me sometimes to hear that people need to make 15, 20, 30% returns. I think we've got ourselves into, an environment that, again, there are winners and there are losers.
And it's a winner take all.
And it's a winner take all. So how do we grow? How do you see growing our country? How do you see it growing it in a sustainable way?
I think just stop. I actually made a proposal once at Art Basel that everybody who has more money than they need to feed themselves and their families should take a whole year off from return.
Yeah.
Like, don't even seek return for a whole year. So we can spend the year to think about what should we do with all this money that we have in the world and how we might deploy it differently. And I don't buy into this bigger. I think we can build an economy that's made up of a lot more smaller players.
Yeah. So how do we change people's attitudes? How do we change behavior? How do we drink less Red Bull and take less Viagra?
Yeah, we were talking about this on the weekend. There was a guy in the Telegraph who said we need to change our attitude so we have less Viagra, less Red Bull, more herbal tea, and afternoon naps.
Yes.
But I think it's for each and every person to think about themselves as an economic person. And what do you do with your money? Where are you spending your money? Back to economic nutrition. Yeah. Think about money's power to be a source of nutrition. And if you're a business person and you therefore control more levers, perhaps, than someone who isn't in the business world or in influential positions in the business world, get up in the morning, look at the world, and try to see it as whole. I think every successful business is going to become, if they're not already, a social business.
Yeah, I do too.
Or maybe I'll say it this way, not just for profit.
Not just for profit. Yeah. I think that the sustainability and purpose, I think, are going to become much more part of enterprise. Fred, can I ask one more question? Okay, one more. How did you find the confidence to embark on your personal project? How did you do this? How did you get over, you were in business, how did you get over your own fears?
My greatest fear was that I was going to become part of the global elite that just wanders around the world not being responsible for anything. Yeah. That was my greatest fear, because my father is not so long dead that he's not still there talking. Yeah. And he would say, I think, good that you've come a distance to figure out what happened to the fish, but what are you doing to make sure it doesn't happen again? And I always forget the happy news. The happy news is the cod, the fish, are coming back. So what are we going to do differently this time?
Yeah, to bring it all back.
And it's about economics.
Yeah, it really is about economics. What an inspiration it is to be with Zita. She is, thank God we connected Newfoundland to the rest of our country, because we've got such amazing people that have come from that island and Labrador. I just want to leave the thought of, the islands, the similarities that we have in terms of where we've come from. And we've taken a very similar approach to how we've run our businesses. And I stayed in business, and I continue to do that. But what you've done in Fogo Island, the contribution that you have made to that community, to that society, would never have been achieved without your father making that promise to you and the challenge to you to make that happen. What a thrill it is to be on stage with you, Zita Cobb. Thank you.
Thank you.
Zita, I also want to thank you for an enlightening and inspirational discussion this afternoon. Your ideas and approaches are truly transformative. We've a lot to learn about social entrepreneurship and community economics from the success that you're enjoying through the Shorefast Foundation. Your passion for community and your business experience have benefited not just Fogo Island, but rural communities across Canada at a time when a lot of rural communities are struggling. So it's no surprise that your model is being studied and replicated. The Foundation and Fogo Island initiatives are excellent case studies of the power of investing in the resilience of rural communities. Your approach to combining art, nature, and culture with business, combined with a lot of hard work and risk-taking, hold important lessons for all of us. We want to wish you continued success for your future initiatives. Thank you. And Annette, thanks very much for being such a great friend to the Canadian Club and for doing such a masterful job of moderating today's discussion. And I think Zita may even be prepared to offer you Fogo Island citizenship. This concludes our program today, which will be broadcast on Rogers TV in the days to come. We're grateful to Rogers TV and 680 News for their continuing promotion of Canadian Club events. I'd also like to thank MediaEvents.ca, Canada's online event space, and VVC for streamlining today's event. To learn more about the club, please visit us at canadianclub.org. Thanks very much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you at another of our events in the near future. Have a wonderful afternoon.